Good afternoon. Welcome to the Baker Institute. I'm very pleased to see all of you. I know it's been an interesting day's program, starting with lunch and be going on through the afternoon. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the inaugural Sustainability Summit, Building a Resilient Energy and Materials Future. It's hosted here at the Baker Institute for Public Policy at Rice, where I have the honor to be the director, and by Rice University. This is Earth Day. I remember, I think there are a few in this room who may, the first Earth Day, April 22nd, 1970, when two organizers, Senator Gaylord Nelson and Dennis Hayes, who had dropped out of Harvard Kennedy School in order to work this issue, undertook an event that was timed to fit the gap between spring break and the start of exams to maximize student participation. And student participation remains very much a part of Earth Day and the environmental and sustainability movement today. That first Earth Day, 55 years ago, gave rise, I think quite accurately described as such, gave rise to the modern environmental movement and to the Clean Air and Water Act. So a significant occasion to remember. We planted, as I recall, our graduating class, a garden outside the school, which lasted for about a year before environmental factors and lack of attention returned it to its natural state. So I guess there's a cycle of life and involvement story in this. We're pleased to have all of you here, faculty, students, research leaders, industry partners, policymakers, and community advocates to help launch this important event. Your presence signals not just interest, but momentum. Momentum towards new ideas, new partnerships, and new ways of thinking about sustainability that are both ambitious and grounded in reality. This summit represents a pivotal moment for the Baker Institute and for Rice University more broadly. It marks the start of a new chapter in our collective efforts to address one of the most complex and defining challenges of our time: how to ensure the resilience of our energy and materials systems in the face of accelerating environmental, economic, and geopolitical pressures. The Baker Institute, our mission is to bring evidence-based, fact-based policy assessment, recommendations into dialogue with real-world challenges. Today's program recognizes and reflects that commitment by convening thought leaders and rising scholars to explore how we can develop systems-level solutions that are technically sound, economically market viable, environmentally responsible, and socially equitable. The work is not hypothetical. It's urgent, it's necessary, and it has to be collaborative. What makes today especially meaningful is the way it embodies the strength of cross-campus collaboration. Sustainability at Rice is not confined to just one department or discipline. It's an institutional priority, a shared value, and increasingly a shared language across engineering, natural sciences, social sciences, public policy, architecture, and even the humanities. We're proud to spotlight these connections that extend beyond the university as well. The future of sustainability is deeply interdisciplinary and just as deeply interconnected with the private sector, government, and civil society. What we do at Rice has the potential to influence national conversations, and what we discover in our labs and classrooms can inform real policy and practice. This afternoon's summit will highlight several of these emerging initiatives, projects that model how academic institutions can drive not just research, but real-world impact and transformation. During the networking reception, I encourage you to engage with our graduate student poster session, which showcases some of the most innovative and data-driven work being done across the university. These students are not only the future of sustainability, they're actively shaping it. Thank you again for being here today to help us launch this summit. We're excited for what today represents and even more excited for where it will lead. Welcome and thank you again.
All right, well, good afternoon, everybody. I am thrilled that you're all here. This is very exciting. Welcome to the Baker Institute. I'm Rachel Meidel. I am Fellow of Energy and Sustainability and Deputy Director at Center for Energy Studies here at the Baker Institute. And I'm really honored that you're all here today spending your afternoon with us. It's been 15 months or so since we launched our sustainability initiative at Rice, specifically here at Center for Energy Studies. And I'm really proud of the work that we've done since then. It's always been intertwined and weaved through all of the work that we're doing, but we launched this initiative to make it official about 15 months ago. And so the work that we're all doing and that many of the fellows are doing, that you'll hear from some of them today, it just speaks to the level of interdisciplinary collaboration and complexity that this topic embodies. And so you'll hear from some of them today and talk about some of these issues that we cover under the umbrella of sustainability. So it's really an interesting time in this space. We have new priorities with nationally, new priorities globally, and there's a really deep desire to continue to accelerate energy and material transitions among growing pressure to decarbonize, with the assumption that many of these solutions will result in all of us being better off, solutions that will reduce environmental harm, advance equity, and then even dampen some of the geopolitical volatility that's out there. Yet many of the sustainability frameworks that many of you and many governments rely on don't really address the challenges in a way that looks at the complexity of the issue and the physical realities of the issue. And so that's why the work that we're doing here at Center for Energy Studies is pivotal. It matters in these discussions because we bring together diverse stakeholders, we bridge disciplines, and we ask the very difficult questions. We challenge the assumptions, and we chart new pathways. And so this, for us, is more than just a summit. This is something that is continual and centers across all of our work. And it really is a catalyst for change and for honest conversations. And so here at Rice, this kind of boundary pushing is a part of a larger vision. You heard Ambassador Satterfield mention the word momentum several times. Well, Momentous is a part of Rice University's 10-year strategic plan, and it really leans into sustainability as one of its key priorities. And sustainability is not just periphery to the mission at Rice. It is really central to it, whether we're talking about science and engineering or public policy or business or the humanities. Building a resilient and sustainable future requires intellectual risk-taking, institutional courage, and deep collaboration. And that is what we're about here at the Baker Institute and throughout Rice University. And it is what we really hope to model today in this summit. And so today's summit is not just an opportunity to kind of spotlight the challenges and the risks in energy transitions and material transitions and sustainability conversations. It really is about talking about systems level dialogue and how we could examine in a very data and science driven way the trade-offs, some of the blind spots, and the opportunities that sustainability presents. So we are bringing together a collective group of experts here today. And these all have, a lot of these discussions that we're talking about today don't have easy answers, but they really demand collective responsibility. So thank you for being here, and I encourage you to listen boldly and to question critically and to really connect intentionally throughout this summit. And then I invite you all to stay with us towards the end of the summit when we have our graduate student poster session. I'm really excited to showcase the work that our students are doing across Rice. So thank you again for being here, and let's get started. And so I want to first introduce our first speaker, which is Markku Alexander of the U.S. Plastics Pact, who I'll be chatting with here in our next session. And we'll have time, doesn't matter. Yeah, and we'll have time at the end for questions for all of you to ask the hard questions. So welcome, Markku. Thank you so much for being here. And if you could just, so plastics and sustainability is something that that we've brought to the Center for Energy Studies as a discipline under our sustainability initiative. And so there's many here who might not be familiar with the U.S. Plastics Pact. But before we talk about that, I mean, tell us about you, your background, your journey into doing what you're doing now.
Well, I was born in. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. This is my first time to Houston. My hair doesn't thank you, but I do. Far more humid than where I live in Boise, Idaho, which is extremely dry. But yes, I am Director of Development and Strategic Initiatives with the U.S. Plastics Pact, but I started my career in packaging a little over 20 years ago. I worked for a small family-owned packaging company in Seattle, Washington. It's actually where I met my husband. We did a lot of custom and stock packaging for gourmet and confectionery companies. We also printed film and made bags. And so I started my journey working on the supply side. And then my husband and I moved to Boise so our kids could grow up with their cousins. And I started working for a baby food company called Happy Family Organics. And I worked in packaging sustainability and packaging development there. Happy Family was purchased by Danone, which is a huge global company. You'd recognize brands like Oikos and Activia and Stoke and Silk, so a number of different brands, and they acquired Happy Family. So then about 4 years ago, I moved from my role at Happy doing packaging sustainability to working for Danone North America and doing all packaging sustainability work with them. And then about 2 months ago, a little over 2 months ago, I transitioned to working for the U.S. Plastics Pact. And I have a little bit of a interesting transition into the U.S. Plastics Pact because Danone was one of the very first activators to sign on with the Plastics Pact in 2020. So I spent 4+ years on the activator side, getting really engaged in the work that the Pact was doing. And so a little bit about the U.S. Plastics Pact. We bring together, so it's a nonprofit, and we bring together all parts of the plastics value chain. So brands and retailers to packaging suppliers, resin suppliers, local and state governments, other nonprofits, private, public sector folks. So we convene everyone to work on our vision of a circular economy for plastics. And really what that means is we want to get rid of the plastics that are unnecessary or problematic. We want to design the plastics that we can use, that should be used, to be reusable, recyclable, or compostable. And overall, we want to make sure that those are kept in the system, used again to make new products, and kept out of the environment. And whether that's landfill, the oceans, your neighborhood. So really, we just bring everyone together, and our North Star really is this circular economy. Well, what does that mean? We have 5 distinct targets as part of our roadmap 2.0. And we really do have them in a circle because we really believe in that circularity, and one feeds into the other. We need all of them to be successful. And so the first one is removing those problematic and unnecessary materials. Really, we have a big focus this year on chemicals of concern and really digging into what those are, making sure that human health is at the top of the list. 2 is designing that 100% reusable, recyclable, or compostable. Our third target is to get to a 50% recycling rate and to ensure that infrastructure is at scale. And then the fourth one is incorporating 30% PCR or responsibly sourced bio-based plastic into plastic packaging. And then the fifth one was just added as part of our roadmap 2.0, and that is to scale reuse packaging systems.
So activator, when you say activator.
Yes. So those are our members. So once you join the U.S. Plastics Pact, you're an activator.
Well, now, why was the U.S. Plastics Pact formed to begin with? So it was formed in 2020, right? And
2020.
so that was after China's ban.
Yeah, so China's sword happened in 2018.
2018.
And that is actually when the Ellen MacArthur Foundation kicked off. And so, the U.S. was just getting rid of all of our trash to China. They wisened up and said, we don't want your stuff anymore. And so really, from a global perspective, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation launched their new plastics economy. So these global commitments where companies would sign on to meet these very ambitious targets by 2025, which, hello, we're here, it's not happening. But what it did was ignite this fire, and you have to start somewhere, and it really sparked change. And so from that, WRAP in the UK launched the UK Plastics Pact. So from that, in order to support the Ellen MacArthur Foundation's global commitments on each country is different. We each had to unite within our countries of origin to bring the players together and mobilize where we were located to meet those targets. So there's multiple pacts across the globe, and we all are working toward that same mission of getting into a circular economy for plastics.
And so sustainability, it's a broad term, right? And it's defined differently by everybody. So how does the U.S. Plastics Pact think about or even define sustainability in the context of like packaging and plastics? Because before you answer that, so the U.S. Plastics Pact, so your area of focus on plastics is packaging, right?
Correct.
So it's not like all plastics and all polymers. It's very specific to getting circularity to packaging.
Correct.
And packaging across which industries and sectors?
Any industry or sector that has plastic packaging, we care about all of it. So it's not, and if you look at sustainability, it's such a hard topic, right? And sustainability, I think ultimately, and we're based in fact, data. Of course, there's a lot of emotions that can come out with this topic, but we really are focused on the science and the facts and the data. And so for us, we're focused on plastics. There's a whole world of sustainability out there that all needs to be addressed. We're focused on plastics for now. But really, it's finding the value in the materials, pulling them through the system, using them again. Let's stop taking fossil fuels. Let's reuse what we have. There's no silver bullet when it comes to sustainability. In looking at the plastics, is how do we make them better, safer? How do we rely on them less? And how do we keep them in circulation?
Yeah, one of the questions I get asked a lot is how in the world can plastics be sustainable, right? And so how do you all think about that in the context of packaging, understanding, you guys are all steeped in this. The challenges are real and they're complex and they're global, right?
Yeah.
Supply chains, pricing, consumer behavior, all of that. So how do you think about sustainability from that lens?
Well, you have to look at it from a broad standpoint. So it's not just about if something's recyclable. You talked about decarbonization. You've got to look at the total carbon footprint of a package. A lot of times plastic has a better carbon footprint because it's lighter, it's easier to transport. There's so many different factors you need to look at, and they don't always match up. So how do we improve? Plastic isn't going anywhere. It's safe. If you look at a hospital, there's so much plastic in there. We rely on it. There's certain applications where it's really critically necessary. Where is it not? Where can we eliminate it? So you really have to look at it from like a holistic approach of it's not going anywhere, but how do we rely on it less? How do we use it again? How do we continue to reuse it? And how do we keep it in circulation? There is value to it. I think, a lot of times when people think about materials or your packaging, you see value in an aluminum can or in glass. You don't often think of dollar signs when you think about plastic, but there is absolute economic value in plastic. And so it's really kind of shifting that mindset of it's not just a convenient thing. We're here to make money in the big scheme of things, but let's focus on how do we make this environmentally focused as well? And so the economics are there. It's getting that supply and demand and making it so where it's easier for a consumer to put it in their blue bin and know it's going to get recycled.
Right. Oh, that sounds
Her
horrible.
phone, is it plastic? No.
So with the circular economy, that's the whole idea of that is to keep that material value and economic value in play for as long as possible. And so however that can be done, there's certainly challenges associated with that, right? And you talked about chemicals of concern, and how do you identify what those are, and how do you make sure that you design systems in a way that you're not recirculating those toxic materials?
Yeah. So
and that you're not like hampering the usability and the
Right.
mechanics of it.
I mean, we can't. I mean, one of the first things we tackled within the U.S. Plastic was coming up with the list of problematic and unnecessary materials. That was published. You can see it on our website, and it was really, looking at it as, okay, do you really need a straw? Do you really need, where are things that we can remove where it's not going to really impact the product or the package? Black plastic, that can't be seen at a MRF. So you need to get out of black plastic. It's called carbon black. So it's things like that. But now, and we had, some chemicals of concern, but this year we're really going to do a stronger focus on bringing in the experts. I'm certainly not an expert in chemicals. I know I don't want them in my plastic or anything, frankly. So it's bringing the experts. We have 12 work streams within the U.S. Plastics Pact, and it's kind of where the magic happens. And so there'll be a group focused on problematic materials, and that's got cross value chain representation, and it's digging in and coming in, and so they'll researching what is truly the problem. How do we don't lobby, but how can we educate? How can we go to legislators and bring this data forward, talk about the science? And so each work stream, we have one on PCR. So these work streams, every project they work on, whether it's research, implementing a new project for a community, all of these different things, they're all laddering up to our North Star, which is those 5 targets. And so we have one designated for each of those. We're starting one later this year on source reduction, which also can play into how do we get less plastic in the system to begin with.
So you mentioned that, okay, so targets and milestones, and we've seen a number of different brands throughout the years set these really super ambitious, these goals and targets, and now many of them are pulling back from them for various reasons, because it's just not technically feasible, and other reasons, right? And price and consumer awareness and so forth. And the U.S. Plastics Pact also kind of revised its timeline. So what's behind all of that?
Yeah. So I think voluntary commitments can only get you so far. They're coming out with these incredibly ambitious targets kind of catalyzed a lot of necessary change. There's been really great incremental improvements. We've seen year over year. All of our activators have to report on a number of different variables each year, and we publicly share that data so you can see progress year over year. You see that with a lot of the companies that made these initial 2025 goals. However, you can only, from let's say a brand side, because I used to be a brand, you can design your packaging to be perfect. You can help fund grants that can improve, where your bottles go to get, recycled. But ultimately, it takes a lot more than just a company voluntarily saying, I'm going to do my best to get to the end goal. Where we're at now and what will really help move the needle is extended producer responsibility. And it has now passed in 7 states.
If you could explain.
Yeah, and so extended producer responsibility takes the onus off of the municipalities and the local MRFs and recycling industries.
Material recovering facilities.
Yes. And if you haven't, I was talking to some folks at lunch, if you haven't been to a materials recovery facility, go. It's the most fascinating. Because you put all your stuff in the blue bin, and what does that mean? Where does it go? It goes to a MRF. And the MRF takes it on a wild tour, and it separates and sorts it all. I highly recommend it. Anyway, off my soapbox. So extended producer responsibility takes the cost burden off the back end and puts it on the producers, so the brands, the companies that are making the products that are in the packaging that are going into the market. And it's not just for plastic, it's any packaging out there. And so essentially the package format there's fees associated based on weight. And so the money that's collected, it goes into what's called a producer responsibility organization, a pro. I'm so used to saying pro. And so they're hired on by the state, and the funds that they collect then gets allocated to pay for infrastructure improvements, whether it's new equipment or providing more access for people to be recycled, getting more carts in residential neighborhoods. It's providing consumer education. I mean, it basically funds the investments needed to actually make a scaled improvement, not just a company here and there, because that's just, you can't make change that way. So it's passed in 7 states. We're going to see it pass in more. Policy is a great lever to pull to make change truly happen. Oregon was the first state producers just had to submit all of their data for reporting. Fees will start coming in, and they'll start being able to allocate that money into the state of Oregon to improve their overall infrastructure. And consumer education is a huge piece of this. One thing we're getting ready to do at the PACT is we're launching a coalition of members and working with ERM Shelton and doing some really targeted consumer research. There's been a lot of consumer research done, but this is different. We're going after really behaviors. What's preventing more consumers of doing the thing that they need to do to get materials circulated? So the first phase is doing this so it's aggregating all the research these companies have already done or that's available. What are the gaps that still remain? And then taking that and really launching a multi-year consumer campaign that is targeted on behavior change. Because we can have everyone doing the right thing within the value chain, but if at the end of the day the consumer isn't putting it in the bin and it's not getting back and getting recycled or composted or reused, then we're failing. And so we really need to, and I think there's so much mistrust and confusion, and you hear these articles, well, recycling isn't working, and that's just simply not true. I mean, the Association of Plastics Recyclers, every year, they put out a report of the billions of pounds of materials that make it through. I mean, I'm in the industry, I see it every day, all day. But you hear these things and you start to believe it, and there's these, really scathing articles, and but again, go to your MRF. You can see it in action. You can see it work. And so what's also challenging is there's no harmonization of recycling in the US, pretty much globally. It's all different everywhere. They've got it more figured out than we do, but not even state by state. But if you go to the next town over, what they can recycle is likely different than what can be recycled here. So it's really confusing to get it right. And if you travel somewhere, forget it. You're really, it's just like, I don't know. There are a lot of, if you see the how to recycle label, and now there's a new, a how to recycle, on crack. I can't think of something better to say, but it has a QR code, and you scan the QR code and it tells you based on where you're located, what to do with that package at the end of life. So there's still some guessing here and there with just plain how to recycle, but this tells you, yes, you can recycle it where you are today. It goes in the bin, or no, don't. Because contaminating the recycling bin with wish cycling is just as bad.
Yeah, and I mean, consumer education and awareness and engagement in this is key, because you can't get to circularity and you can't improve recycling rates and reuse rates without that piece of it. But there is one challenge, right? Because even if the consumer does the right thing and puts it in the right bin and it miraculously makes its way to the recycling facility, a lot of the plastics that are in use today just can't be recycled for in traditional mechanical forms, right? Which is why so much of it gets landfilled and incinerated. I mean, there's multiple factors why it ends up like that. But just the plastics, the complexity, contamination. I mean, whatever the reasons, which is beyond this discussion, just can't get recycled in traditional systems, right? And so now we have the advent of advanced chemical molecular recycling. And the U.S. Plastics Pact, now you are the holder of this responsible production guidelines framework that was developed as a part of the larger global plastics treaty negotiation on how to responsibly recycle these things. And so, how do you all, it's a very controversial topic.
Sure is.
I mean, how do you all think about that? Because you can't, it's impossible for us to improve recycling rates and to get to a circular economy without advanced chemical molecular recycling. That's just
Agreed. So I would say first step in the game is you've got to look at mechanical recycling. Only then, if it isn't, like you said, compatible to go through mechanical recycling, you would look to advanced chemical molecular recycling as, like a friend, like a side, like, I can't deal with this, you take it. So, but it's complementary. It's not to compete. And so, and I'll first state, when it comes to chemical recycling, we do not believe in, to energy or
plastics
fuel.
Of fuel.
No. Yeah. It needs to go back in. It needs to get broken back down to its original form and go back into a product. There are so many different types of technologies when it comes to chemical recycling. There's pyrolysis, methanolysis. I mean, there's
dozens.
Dozens. Yeah. And so we actually, later this year, will be publishing a white paper on chemical recycling, so stay tuned. But again, we have experts across the industry within the pack. So, we have to look at it, and you have to look at it too from, is it safety, environmental justice? Like we're really looking at all the factors, but truly, if you think about film, a lot of film can't get, you can't put film in your blue bin and get recycled. It gets tangled up in the equipment at the MRF. It's a nightmare. There are store drop-off bins, but really the challenge right now is how do we collect film and get it recycled? But if you've got something with like multiple layers, if you think like a chip bag, some products can't be designed to just be a single type of film. And so the alternative to be able to recycle it, because there is value there and it can go back into new products, is to go through advanced recycling. So we really have to look at, and every technology has, you have to look at them each individually.
Right.
What's the LCA look like? What's the
life cycle assessment?
Life cycle assessment. Sorry, I'm used to nerding out with packaging geeks. What is the environmental impact? You have to look at all of the variables and then make a decision, and they're just not all the same.
Right, and the way that I think policymakers today and society in general talk about that as if it's one technology,
it's
and
not
so
a blanket.
it's being painted with a broad brush and kind of under the umbrella of incineration, which from a technology and science and engineering perspective, that's very different. And so how do you, because you all deal with multiple perspectives across the entire plastics value chain, and there's a lot of emotion built into this, and a lot of pushback from communities on getting recycling facilities like chemical recycling facilities. So, how do you talk in a way that is disarming? It's a complicated topic. It's very science and data heavy. It's difficult to understand for the general public. How do you bring them into the conversation to build trust with the community on things that can be so divisive?
I think a lot of it is making it understandable. Like it is, and we are based in science and fact, and you've got to boil that down to where it makes sense to, like, when we talk with legislators, you've got to make it make sense. So you kind of do that through storytelling. And I don't mean that in like we're making stuff up. It's like, how do you share this information in a way that resonates and like sticks? And it's not just this, big words and things that are hard to understand. So I think it's, and showing how it affects you personally or your community. I mean, I think having the experts within the PACT who know how to do that. I mean, we the PACT team, we're not experts in all the things, but we bring them all together. That's why it's so great. My favorite thing when I was in the PACT from the brand side was I wanted to have these conversations. I wanted to learn. I wanted to talk to a reclaimer and like if I change the design of this, what's going to happen when it gets to you? And it's just really hard to find those people and have direct conversation. But the PACT makes it so easy. So I would have direct access to a resin supplier or a local MRF community. I'm like, when it goes through if it goes through your system, tell me how it would travel. And we have labs that do testing. So I had all this access, and we use this cool program called Basecamp to do communications between activators. And if I had a question from a colleague that I couldn't answer, I would post the question to Basecamp and immediately get responses. And I could have phone calls with these folks and really, just the knowledge I gained from working across the sector, we've got so many experts. And so we pull from that. I'm not sure I answered your question, did I? I get really excited talking about these things.
Well, now I want to, because I know we were running a little bit late, but I do want to open it up to questions from the audience if there are any. And I know that we've got, Marum has the microphone here, and I know Jim here. Oh, yeah. Here's.
But I don't know that you can answer it. I don't know that we have a MRF in Houston. I mean, we're a big city. We have the West Side or Wesleyan Recycling Center. Is that one of them?
No, that is there is a material recovery facility here, but yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Go to it.
Waste management, open house.
Yeah, there are over 9,000 different recycling, not 9,000 MRFs, but 9,000 different recycling programs in the U.S., which is insane, which is why it's very confusing. But all your recyclables are going to a MRF somewhere, so.
And they all have very different requirements on what they accept.
And every MRF I've ever been to, and I've been to a ton, are very different. So go to as many as you can. But some have state-of-the-art optical sorters and robots and AI, and some are people literally
still hand sorting.
Yeah.
I'm glad to see you like industrial tourism as well. So my question, though, is about something you said at the outset, which is there were some very ambitious or aspirational goals that haven't been achieved. So what were those goals, and what do you think are more, shall we say, realistic goals for the next 5 or 10 years?
Yeah, so I will say, they all originally stemmed from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and they're getting ready to do their next phase of the global commitments, because 2025 is coming to an end. And we within the U.S. Plastics Pact, we're impatient. We couldn't wait. We're like, we got to come up with what is realistic for us to do next time, or moving forward. So I would say pretty much all of them were extremely ambitious. So 100% reusable, recyclable, or compostable by 2025. To get to 100%, you can do it with PET, HDPE, those are, that's your water bottle and your laundry detergent. But when it comes to flexible film, getting to 100% recyclability for that, there's just the infrastructure is not in place. Things just aren't scaled to where, so you could design everything to be those things, but it's not in scale to actually happen. So that was one of them. And film is great, except for the end of life piece. But there's a lot of work being done to redesign, to getting to monopolyethylene, which is the one that can go in. We have end markets in the U.S. for that. It can be made into other things, and that's what the material that goes into your grocery store front of house bins. Which, by the way, it's not just for grocery bags. There's a ton of things that can go in there. So start checking your labels. So that's one example. PCR. Trying to get 30% PCR, post-consumer recycled content into all of your plastic packaging. There isn't remotely that much available in the market to fulfill that. So it's a supply and demand issue, but what all of these ambitions did was start to ignite change. So we've seen a huge increase in the amount of PCR. We're not there yet because, frankly, when it comes to, and I worked for a food company, to get post-consumer recycled content that's FDA approved for, and you want it to be safe for direct food contact, the volume of availability of material is just not there yet. So we have to scale these things, and it just takes time, and we've seen huge improvements, but that's why the targets have had to move out. It's just infrastructure, economics, material availability. We just didn't know what we didn't know, but putting a stake in the ground was an excellent way to start to make things change. So I have no issue with targets being moved out. They were all voluntary commitments to begin with. EPR, we will see, will help bridge that gap because it will fund the things that are needed to scale, to make it possible.
So to the point of EPR, you mentioned that there are 7 states that now have enacted laws around that. What is the tipping point? Because I can imagine that brands won't be able to supply certain packaging SKUs to one state and different ones to another state. And so how do the dominoes
That's
fall?
An excellent question, and you're right. Brands cannot make packaging state by state. So in the US, you have to base all your decisions on the state with the most stringent law, which is almost always California. And so, whether it comes to PCR, so there's states that have requirements around a certain amount of PCR you have to have in your bottles. Again, you can't do PCR state by state, so you err on the highest or the most stringent, and also California. So that's really, so it ends up actually benefiting all of the states, but the funding from the fees or fines collected benefit that particular state.
And so do you see a timeline that starts to make that cycle go? Like, if California can do it, now you've got a pilot and a model. How rapidly can that be replicated and moved around?
Well, so it's a slow process because, even when a state passes EPR, then they have to develop the program plan, which takes years. You have to get the pro in place, which is the ones that are going to, basically hold all the producers accountable and collect the funds and then disperse the funds. Oregon just had their reports submitted, and I think they start collecting fees this summer, if I'm correct. And so then, but each year, the pot of money will continue to build, and it will continue to go back into the communities. So, it's a multi-year approach, and the fees change over time, and then there's incentives for producers to create better, more sustainable packaging. So the fees it's called eco-modulation, if anyone is interested. But let's say I have a PET bottle and I have to pay 20 cents a pound for anything I have in it that's PET. But then if I add PCR to that bottle, my fees go down to, let's say, 15 cents. So you get incentivized to make more sustainable choices with your packaging. So that also is a lever. So you're funding where it needs to go, but then the producer side is designing and implementing better packaging so that they don't have to pay as much on that end. So you might be paying more for the PCR, but you're paying, does that make sense?
And meanwhile, the technology downstream
Yes.
has to develop and scale, and we
Correct.
need policies to kind of move that along.
And
as
a really
well.
important piece too is making sure that there's end markets, so that there are, and multiple end markets. You can't just have one that wants that. There needs to be at least 3 so that there's demand for that material and that it will flow into the system.
Let's see, what are we doing on time here? Do we have room for one more question before we move on? Yeah, let's take one. Okay, we'll take one more.
Thank you. My name is Jesse Lyman. I'm actually a founder of a company called Dissolve, where we invented a polymer that replaces a sustainable alternative to polyethylene, polystyrene, and polypropylene. One of the barriers that we've been fighting with working with plastic manufacturers is biomaterials can't be recycled. And with that, and them being so fixated on plastic circularity, that it's a hard battle to have. Even though biomaterials can be recycled, there's just not enough volume to create a secondary market. So, it's really hard to overcome that challenge, even though you do have a sustainable alternative for them. So do you see policies or any solutions that recycling will adapt to biomaterials, and what is that direction?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think that's something that's going to take time. But I mean, even in our Target 4, we talk about incorporating post-consumer recycled content or responsibly sourced bio-based. It's all about the scaling, right? I mean, even when it comes to composting, ideally it just sounds so wonderful. But when it comes to like compostable packaging, it can't be put in your municipal recycling bin. It can't go in your home composting bin. It has to be industrial recycled or industrial composted. And infrastructure for that is so few and far between. A lot of places don't have access to even, I mean, where I live in Boise, we don't have any industrial composting facility anywhere nearby. So every time I go to a coffee shop and they have compostable packaging, I'm like, that's going to landfill. I get the desire and the want, but that's where infrastructure, or that's where EPR fees can come help fund building out the infrastructure so that it can get scaled, so then it can become a normal part of the system.
Correct, because again, if there's volume, it kind of fixes itself just based on supply and demand. Mm-hmm. I guess also with landfills, I think there's such a bad taste for landfills. Although for something that is home compostable, right, a landfill wouldn't necessarily be the worst end of life solution because it does ultimately go away.
But not in a landfill because of the methane. Like it just stays.
It goes away faster than what would be plastic, right? So yeah, again, even it being a possible solution, but with recycling, it's just kind of put that on the back burner.
Yeah.
So
I think you will see advancements there.
I think this is the challenge of sustainability, right? It's complicated, and there are situations where landfilling might be the most sustainable choice because you don't have that migrating to waterways and so forth, and the bio-based materials may not be the most sustainable choice if you don't have an end-of-life option for it. So, Mark, thank you so much. It's been very, very insightful. Appreciate your expertise here and your insights, and hopefully you can stay for a little bit before you head back to Idaho.
All right.
So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.